Hello everyone, and welcome to Vale of Hearts, where even the coldest souls learn that love is the most dangerous weapon of all. They call him the Devil of Wall Street, ruthless, untouchable, and feared by everyone who's ever dared to cross him. But on one frozen night in Brooklyn, a broke nursing student made him stop. Lena Rowe only wanted to help a teenage boy who had collapsed on the sidewalk. She didn't know that a single phone call, one number labeled Dad, would summon black SUVs, armed men, and a man whose eyes could silence a room. Dominic Vance was the kind of man who ruled with power, not mercy. Yet from the moment he looked at her, something shifted. A crack in the armor, a flicker of something human. As Lena is pulled into his dangerous world of secrets, lies and late-night whispers, she begins to see the truth hidden beneath his darkness. Even the devil can fall in love. Snow drifted down in heavy, lazy flakes, soft enough to look beautiful but cold enough to hurt. Brooklyn had gone quiet, muffled under the weight of winter. The kind of silence that made your thoughts too loud. Lena Rowe pulled her scarf tighter and kept walking, her breath fogging in the air. Her shoes were soaked, her tips from the diner barely covered the bus fare home, and her phone battery was clinging to 1%. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd enrolled in nursing school. But at least it was hers, she muttered to herself. If one more customer asks for extra napkins after I've clocked out, I swear I'll commit a mild, non-lethal crime. The streetlight ahead flickered once, then went out. Lena frowned. Franklin Avenue always felt creepy at night, but tonight it felt wrong. Too still, too dark. And then she tripped. She caught herself against the brick wall, heart racing, and looked down, expecting trash, a bag, anything. Instead, she saw him. A boy, maybe 15 or 10, lying half on the sidewalk, half in the gutter. His skin was the kind of pale that screamed danger to a nursing student. Private school blazer, leather shoes, watch worth more than her tuition. Oh my God. She dropped to her knees. Hey, kid. Hey! No response. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. A pulse, faint but there. His breathing was shallow, erratic. She lifted his wrist, checked the skin, clammy, cold. Hypoglycemia, her brain supplied instantly. Severe. Okay, she said, mostly to herself. So you're not dying on my watch, got it? She glanced around. No one. Not a single car passing. Pulling out her phone, she tried to call 911, but no signal. Of course. Her eyes caught on the boy's phone lying beside him. It was sleek, locked, but the emergency contact flashed up. Dad, that's convenient, she whispered. Let's hope Dad's not a psycho. She hit the call button. It rang once. Where are you? The voice on the other end was deep, smooth, and cold enough to freeze blood. Hi. So, your son's here on Franklin Avenue. I think he fainted or something. Is he breathing? Yes, but he needs medical attention. I think it's a severe sugar crash. Maybe don't move him. Don't call anyone else. I'll be there in 10 minutes. And the line went dead. Lena blinked at the phone. Okay, so, not a fan of small talk. Got it. She sat beside the boy, rubbing his hands to keep him warm, checking his pulse every few seconds. The snow was falling harder now, dusting his eyelashes. Seriously, she murmured. Who lets their kid walk around this neighborhood dressed like he just stepped off a magazine cover? 8 minutes later, the quiet shattered. Headlights appeared at the end of the street. 3 black SUVs gliding in formation, silent except for the hum of expensive engines. The vehicles stopped with military precision. Doors opened. Men in black coats stepped out, their movements sharp, disciplined. Lena's pulse spiked. Okay, she whispered. So definitely not an Uber. And then he appeared. The man who stepped out of the middle SUV moved like someone used to being obeyed. Tall, broad shoulders beneath a tailored coat, face carved with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to shout to be terrifying. His gaze swept the street once, calculating, assessing, before locking on her. He didn't ask who she was. Didn't even hesitate. He knelt beside the boy, opened a small case from his coat, and pulled out a medical injector. Within seconds, color began returning to the boy's cheeks. Lena let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to do next. Totally under control. The man glanced up, those eyes dark and unreadable. You're the one who called. Guilty, she said. You must be Dad? For the first time, a flicker of emotion passed through his face. Relief, quickly buried. Dominic Vance, he said. His voice carried weight, a name that sounded familiar in the way headlines do. He helped the boy sit up. Nicholas, he said quietly. What did I tell you about skipping your glucose checks? Sorry, Dad, the boy mumbled. Dominic's gaze softened just slightly before turning back to Lena. You saved his life, she shrugged. Anyone would have stopped. No, he said, voice firm. They wouldn't have. He reached into his coat and pulled out a sleek black card. Just a phone number embossed in silver. Call this tomorrow morning. Why? Because I owe you, and I always repay my debts. Lena crossed her arms, trying to mask the nervous flutter in her chest. You know, most people just say, thank you. Maybe buy a coffee. Something almost like a smile touched his lips. Quick, fleeting, gone before she could decide if it was real. He stood, helping Nicholas toward the SUV, and before climbing in, said without turning back, 10 o'clock. Don't be late. Then he was gone. Lena stood in the snow, staring after the disappearing cars. The street went quiet again. In her hand, the card felt heavier than it should. Cold metal edges biting into her palm. She didn't know why, but one thought wouldn't leave her mind. That wasn't an invitation. It was a warning. That night, sleep never came. Lena kept hearing his voice, calm, commanding, terrifyingly steady, echoing in her head. When dawn finally broke, the world outside looked colorless, like someone had drained all warmth from it. Maybe that's what his presence did. It lingered, even after he was gone, after he was... On her nightstand, the black card waited like a curse. Just one number. No name. No reason to call. And yet, at 8:03 a.m., she did. The line picked up after one ring. Miss Rowe, a woman's voice said, crisp and emotionless. Mr. Vance is expecting you. A car will arrive in 40 minutes. Lena blinked. Wait, I didn't even... But the line had already gone dead. She stared at her phone, muttering, wow, they really don't do small talk in billionaire land. 40 minutes later, a black sedan stopped outside her apartment. It didn't honk. It didn't idle. It simply appeared, like it had been there all along, waiting for her to make up her mind. The driver, an older man in a dark suit, stepped out and opened the door without a word. His silence made her nervous. People who didn't talk always did. Morning, Lena said awkwardly. So, you guys ever smile? Or is that against company policy? He didn't answer, but his eyebrow twitched. A small victory. As the city blocks blurred past, Lena pressed her face to the cold window. The streets of Brooklyn gave way to cleaner roads, wider sidewalks, and finally, the kind of neighborhoods that smelled like old money and quiet power. The air itself seemed to change the closer they got to the Hudson River. When the car turned, through an iron gate flanked by stone lions, Lena's mouth fell open. The Vance estate wasn't a house. It was a kingdom. Stone walls, long driveways, snow-dusted trees. The mansion stood on a rise overlooking the frozen river, its glass windows catching the morning light like sheets of fire and ice. She got out slowly, boots crunching on the gravel. Well, she muttered, either I'm about to get a new job, or I'm walking into a murder mystery. The front door opened before she could knock. A petite woman in her 50s stood there, composed and smiling gently. Miss Rowe? I'm Mrs. Chen. Please come in. Mr. Vance is waiting for you. Lena followed her through a hallway so grand it made her dizzy. The floor gleamed like glass. The walls were lined with old paintings. Serious men, stern women. No smiles anywhere. Even the air smelled expensive. Mrs. Chen led her to a tall set of double doors and paused. He doesn't like to be kept waiting, she said softly, then slipped away. The doors opened. Dominic Vance stood near the window, back turned to her, his silhouette outlined against the pale winter light. He was dressed in black again, sharp suit, crisp lines, nothing out of place. He didn't turn around immediately. For a few seconds, the only sound was the soft tick of a clock and Lena's own heartbeat. "Miss Rowe," he said finally, his voice smooth but distant. "You came." "Well," she said, forcing a nervous laugh. "Your assistant kind of made it sound like a royal decree. Figured saying no might be illegal." He turned then, and those eyes met hers again, dark, calm, unyielding. And yet, just for a flicker, something almost human passed through them. "Sit," he said. She did. The chair was too soft. It made her feel smaller than she already did. He leaned against his desk, hands clasped loosely. "You're in nursing school. You handled Nicholas's—" "Eli," she corrected gently. "He told me his name." That earned her the faintest arch of an eyebrow. "You handled Eli's episode calmly. Most people would have panicked. You didn't." "I didn't have time to," Lena said. "Plus, I've seen worse. My ex once fainted at the sight of his own tattoo. That kind of lowers the bar for drama." Something that might have been amusement glimmered in his expression, gone as quickly as it came. "I need someone like you," he said. "Someone trustworthy, steady. My son's condition is unpredictable. He requires round-the-clock supervision. You'll stay here, monitor his glucose levels, accompany him to school and appointments. Everything you need will be provided." Lena blinked. "You're asking me to live here?" "I'm offering you employment," he corrected. "And what if I say no?" "You won't." He said it the same way he had the night before. Quiet, certain, terrifyingly confident. She exhaled slowly. "You really need to work on your sales pitch. You know that?" Dominic's lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. "I find honesty more efficient." Mrs. Chen reappeared to show Lena around the mansion. The house was silent, the kind of silence that made her ears ring. Each hallway felt endless, filled with portraits that watched her pass. She wondered if Dominic ever walked these halls at night, alone with those faces staring back at him. "Mr. Vance doesn't like noise," Mrs. Chen said gently, as if reading her thoughts. "He values order." "Yeah," Lena murmured. "I noticed." When they reached the guest wing, Mrs. Chen paused outside a room. "This will be yours if you accept the position." "If?" Lena asked. Mrs. Chen smiled faintly. "He already knows your answer. You're the only person who doesn't." Later that afternoon, Lena met Eli. He was sitting cross-legged on a sofa, reading a comic book, a sensor blinking faintly on his arm. He looked up when she entered, wary at first, then curious. "You're the nurse?" he asked. "Temporary superhero, actually," Lena said, dropping into the armchair opposite him. "But yeah, nurse works too." Eli cracked a tiny smile. "You don't talk like the others." "Good," she said, "because the others sound like robots." That made him laugh, a real, small, human sound that warmed the room. They talked for a while about school, video games, and how much his father hated birthdays. He wasn't shy, but he carried himself like someone who'd learned early not to trust easily. When Dominic appeared in the doorway an hour later, the air changed instantly. Even without speaking, his presence filled the room, steady, commanding. "Eli," he said, voice softer than before. "It's time for your insulin." Eli sighed but nodded. Lena helped him prep and inject, her movements efficient and calm. Dominic watched silently, his gaze flicking between his son and her hands. When it was done, Eli excused himself to rest. Lena turned to Dominic. "He's doing well. His readings are stable." "Good." He hesitated, then added quietly, "Thank you." She raised an eyebrow. "Wow, the great Dominic Vance says thank you. Should I frame this moment?" That earned her another flicker of a smile, quick, involuntary. But behind it, something darker lingered. He stepped closer, stopping just a few feet away. "You think I'm heartless, don't you?" "I think you're complicated," she said carefully. "Complicated." His voice lowered. "That's one word for it." For a moment, their eyes met, and it was like the whole house held its breath. There was no warmth there, but there was intensity. The kind that draws you closer, even when you know you shouldn't. Lena broke eye contact first. "If you're done staring, I should probably check on Eli's dinner schedule." "Mrs. Chen will handle it," he said, but his tone had softened. "You can rest. You'll need it." She frowned. That sounded almost considerate. "Don't get used to it." That night, in the guest room overlooking the Hudson, Lena stood by the window, watching the snow fall again. The river was frozen over, a stretch of silver glass under the moonlight. She could see her reflection, faintly in the glass. A girl who didn't belong here, holding secrets she didn't yet understand. Below, in his study, Dominic Vance stood alone. The light from his desk lamp threw long shadows across the floor. On the table lay a file with Lena's name on it, her photo, transcripts, background. He had read every detail, but none of it explained her eyes. He remembered the way she'd looked at him that night, calm, unflinching, like she wasn't afraid of the monster the world believed him to be, and that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. For the first time in years, Dominic Vance didn't know what he wanted more, to keep her close, or to send her far away before she made him feel human again. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, the devil was no longer sure if he still knew how to be one. The days inside the Vance mansion unfolded like a dream she couldn't quite wake from. Quiet, ordered, and laced with something she couldn't name. There was beauty everywhere. Marble halls that caught the morning light, the faint hum of classical music drifting from unseen speakers, the smell of cedar and espresso in the air. But beneath it all lingered something cold, like a whisper that told her, "You don't belong here." Dominic Vance moved through his own home like a shadow. He spoke little, his words clipped and precise, never wasting a syllable. Every time Lena saw him, he looked immaculate, suit pressed, expression unreadable, as if emotions were luxuries he'd long since sold off. He was polite, even gentle when Eli was in the room. But the second his son left, the warmth vanished, leaving behind only silence and distance. It should have made him easy to dislike. But it didn't. Because sometimes, just sometimes, she caught him looking. Not with arrogance or disdain, but with something closer to ache. It was always fleeting, gone before she could decide if she imagined it. At first, Lena focused on her job. Eli's routine became her rhythm. Morning glucose checks, classes, the occasional piano lesson in the East Wing. The boy was bright and kind, quick with sarcasm, and far too old for his age. He asked once, "Do you get lonely here?" She smiled. "You mean in the house of silent statues?" "Maybe a little," he grinned. "You make it less quiet." Dad doesn't like that, though. Doesn't like what? When people make noise. When they remind him that things can still move. The way he said it made her chest tighten. Sometimes Eli spoke like he'd seen too much of the world through his father's eyes. One night, unable to sleep, Lena wandered the halls. The mansion at midnight felt different. Vast, echoing, alive. Every sound seemed amplified. Her footsteps on the marble floor, the wind pressing against the glass, the faint ticking of a clock somewhere deep in the house. She turned a corner and froze. Through the half-open door of the study, she saw him. Dominic sat at his desk, coat off, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His tie hung loose, his hair slightly disheveled, the first time she'd seen him anything less than perfect. He wasn't working. He was staring at something, a framed photograph on the desk, his fingers tracing its edge. Lena should have looked away. But she couldn't. The man in that moment wasn't the feared tycoon or the devil of Wall Street. He was someone lost. Someone carrying a weight too heavy for his silence to hide. Then, without looking up, he spoke. "You shouldn't be awake this late, Miss Rowe," she startled. "Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." He didn't look angry, only tired. "You didn't. But this house isn't kind to wanderers." Something in his tone made her shiver. She nodded and quietly left. But that night, as she lay awake, she couldn't shake the image of his face. Not cold, not cruel, just alone. The next morning, Dominic was himself again, crisp, distant, unreadable. If he remembered their encounter, he didn't show it. But Lena noticed the smallest things. How his eyes softened when Eli laughed. How his hand lingered on the boy's shoulder a fraction longer than necessary, as if reassuring himself that he was still there. There was love in him, deep, buried, twisted by guilt. And Lena, despite every warning her brain screamed, found herself wanting to understand it. A week passed before the house began to feel alive. Eli grew attached to her. He'd follow her to the kitchen, help her test his sugar levels, even sneak cookies when he thought she wasn't watching. "Don't tell Dad," he whispered one afternoon, cookie crumbs on his lips. "I'll take that to my grave," she said, mock solemn. He laughed, and for a moment, it felt normal, like they were any family, in any home. That illusion shattered later that day when Dominic entered the room. His presence was like gravity. The air tightened, sound died. "Eli," he said, voice firm but calm. "Did you take your 3 p.m. dose?" Eli nodded quickly, eyes darting guiltily toward Lena. Dominic followed the glance, his jaw tightening just enough for her to notice. He didn't scold. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His silence did the work. When Eli left, Dominic looked at her. "He's getting attached," he said quietly. "Don't encourage it," Lena frowned. "He's a kid, Dominic. He needs warmth, not instructions." His eyes flicked up sharply. "And you think you can provide that?" "I am providing that," she said. "You should try it sometime." For a heartbeat, the air froze. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Small, genuine, devastating, careful. "Miss Rowe, I might start to think you enjoy provoking me." "Only when you deserve it," she shot back. Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not amusement. Something far more dangerous. That night, as snow began to fall again, Lena wrote in her notebook. Small observations, the kind she'd never say aloud. "He's not what people think. He hides behind silence, but there's sorrow in every word he doesn't speak. I don't know whether I pity him or understand him." She paused, staring at the page. Then quietly she added, "Maybe both." Outside, the wind howled softly against the glass, and somewhere down the hall, she thought she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, stopping right outside her door. But when she opened it, the corridor was empty. The next day felt heavier, as if the walls themselves knew something Lena didn't. Everyone in the mansion seemed quieter than usual. Even Mrs. Chen moved like she was afraid to disturb the air. Dominic had been gone all morning, and when he returned, he carried with him the chill of winter itself. He passed her in the hallway without a word, but his eyes lingered for a fraction longer than they should have. Something had changed. That evening, while checking Eli's vitals in the study, Lena noticed a folder on the corner of Dominic's desk. It wasn't like the others. No financial papers, no company stamps. Just a plain black file, slightly worn around the edges. She wasn't the kind of person who pried. But the silence in this house was starting to eat at her. Curiosity had become her only rebellion. Later that night, she passed by the same room again. The light was still on. Voices. 2 of them. She hesitated by the door. "No, it wasn't random," a man's voice said. Rough, urgent. "You know it. They wanted her dead." Lena froze. Dominic's voice came low and controlled. Keep your voice down. They took your wife, Dominic. You think that was business? It was a message. The words hit her like a slap. His wife. Enough, Dominic snapped. Sharper now. I said enough, but the man wouldn't stop. You didn't bend. You fought back, and she paid the price. That's on you. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Dominic spoke, softer, but filled with something far more dangerous than anger. And they killed her for it. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled back, hand brushing the wall. The papers inside the folder, his wife's name perhaps, flickered in her mind like forbidden light. She should leave. She knew she should leave, and that's when the door opened. Dominic stood there. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those dark, merciless eyes, burned like they could strip her bare. Eavesdropping, Miss Rowe? Her throat tightened. I just heard voices. He stepped forward, each movement slow, deliberate, predatory. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Lying doesn't suit you, he murmured. You're trembling. I'm not, she said, though her pulse betrayed her. He was close now, close enough that she could smell the faint trace of his cologne, something dark and clean like smoke and salt. Curiosity is a dangerous habit, Dominic said quietly. His hand braced against the wall beside her head. His voice had dropped lower, rougher, the kind that made words feel like touch. And you're a dangerous man, she whispered. He leaned closer, his breath brushing her ear. You have no idea. Her body tensed, heart pounding. Then maybe you should tell me, she said, defiant even as fear and something else, something hotter, twisted inside her. He exhaled sharply, as if her words had struck him. His gaze softened, only slightly, and for one impossible heartbeat, she saw it. The grief, the loneliness, the exhaustion of a man who hadn't slept peacefully in years. He whispered, You shouldn't have heard that. Maybe I was meant to. Dominic's jaw flexed. You think I'm a villain, Lena? I think, she said, her voice barely audible. You're a man trying too hard to be one. The tension cracked, silent, electric. His hand, still on the wall, trembled once before he pulled it away, breaking the moment. Go, he said softly. But his tone wasn't command anymore. It sounded almost pleading. Lena didn't move. If you wanted me gone, you wouldn't look at me like that. Dominic's eyes flickered. Conflict, danger, desire. Don't test me. I'm not, she said, voice shaking now. But maybe you should stop pretending you're untouchable. For a long second, neither of them breathed. Then almost imperceptibly, Dominic stepped back. The spell broke. He turned away, voice low. Good night, Miss Rowe. Lena slipped out, closing the door behind her. Her hands trembled as she leaned against the wall, the echo of his voice still clinging to her skin. That night she couldn't sleep. The house was silent except for the wind outside, but her mind replayed every second of that moment. The closeness, the look in his eyes, the ache she hadn't meant to feel. She hated herself for it, for wanting to understand him, for seeing the humanity in a man everyone else feared. And yet, beneath the fear, something deeper stirred, an awareness that she was already in too deep. Downstairs, Dominic poured himself a glass of whiskey he wouldn't drink. He stood by the window, watching the snow fall over the frozen Hudson. He had faced assassins, corporate sharks, and men who would kill without hesitation. But not once in all those years had anything shaken him like the look in that girl's eyes. Not fear. Not pity, just truth. She'd seen through him. Through the armor, through the anger. And for the first time since his wife's death, Dominic Vance felt something dangerously close to being alive. He closed his eyes, gripping the glass until his knuckles whitened. She's just a nurse, he muttered to himself. Nothing more. But he knew that was a lie, because even devils bleed, and Lena Rowe had already found the wound. The next morning they met in the hallway. Neither spoke, but something had shifted, a new current humming beneath every glance. Lena passed him, her voice quiet, steady. You can lock every door in this house, Dominic. But you can't hide what's already breaking inside you. He didn't answer, but for the first time, he didn't look away. And in that silence, fragile, dangerous, alive, something between them began to burn. The invitation arrived 3 days later. Heavy black paper sealed with silver wax, elegant and cold, like everything else that bore Dominic Vance's name. Mrs. Chen handed it to Lena at breakfast. "The annual charity gala," she said softly. "It's the only event Mr. Vance still attends." Lena raised a brow. "And he wants me to go?" Mrs. Chen hesitated, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Apparently, yes. And Eli, too. It's quite the occasion." That evening, the mansion buzzed with quiet preparation. A car waited outside, sleek and black, headlights cutting through the mist that hung over the Hudson. Dominic stood near the staircase in a tailored suit of deep midnight blue, understated, powerful. When Lena descended the stairs in a simple emerald dress Mrs. Chen had helped her find, Dominic looked up, and for a moment something unreadable flickered in his eyes. "You clean up well," she said, forcing a grin to mask her nerves. "You're late," he replied, but the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "And overdressed. Funny," she said. "I was just thinking the same about you." Behind them, Eli appeared in his tiny tuxedo, fiddling with his tie. "Do I really have to go?" He groaned. "Yes," Dominic said. "It's good for people to see you." Eli sighed dramatically. "Can they just see me online?" Lena laughed. "Sorry, kid. No escaping rich people drama tonight." Dominic's eyes softened as he watched them. The sound of her laughter, rare, bright, seemed to pull something inside him loose. The gala was held in Manhattan, at a marble ballroom glittering with chandeliers. Everywhere Lena looked, there were gowns that sparkled like frost, tuxedos that cost more than her rent, and smiles sharp enough to draw blood. The moment they entered, whispers began. Heads turned. The devil of Wall Street had arrived, and for the first time, he wasn't alone. Dominic walked with the quiet authority of a man who ruled the room without effort. Lena, by his side, felt every gaze like a knife. She wasn't part of this world, and everyone knew it. Still, when his hand brushed hers, briefly, almost accidental, she straightened her shoulders. For reasons she couldn't explain, his touch steadied her. They'd barely made it through the first hour when he appeared. Silas Crowe. The name alone made the air colder. Tall, charming, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He approached with a drink in hand and the confidence of a man who enjoyed breaking things just to see how far they'd bend. "Well, well," Crowe drawled, "Dominic Vance gracing us with his presence. And here I thought you'd forgotten how to socialize." Dominic's jaw flexed. "Crowe." Crowe's gaze slid toward Lena, deliberate, assessing. "And who is this?" "Don't tell me the rumors are true. The infamous Mr. Vance has finally hired himself a personal angel." Lena blinked. "Excuse me?" He chuckled. "Oh, come now. Word travels fast. They say you've got a new nurse. Pretty little thing, always at your side. I suppose even the devil gets lonely." Dominic's voice cut through the noise, low and deadly. "Careful, Silas," Crowe smirked. "Relax, old friend. I'm just saying, men like us, we tend to confuse medicine with affection." The silence that followed was sharp as glass. Lena's chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to snap back, to defend herself. But Dominic's hand brushed her wrist. "A warning, don't." So she met Crowe's gaze instead, calm, steady. "I think you've had too much champagne," she said evenly. Crowe smiled wider. "Oh, I like her." Dominic's eyes turned to steel. "Touch her with your eyes again, Silas, and I'll remind you why your last company went under." Crowe laughed, raising his glass. "There he is, the old Dominic. Enjoy the evening." He walked away, but his smirk lingered like poison in the air. Dinner was served, but the tension didn't fade. Dominic barely touched his food. Lena pretended to focus on Eli, who looked pale and restless, tugging at his collar. "Hey," she whispered. "You okay?" "I don't feel good," Eli muttered. His hands trembled. "Too many people. Too hot." Lena's instincts screamed. She grabbed her small emergency kit from her bag. "Dominic!" she said quickly, voice low. He's crashing, now. Dominic's head snapped up. The mask shattered instantly. He stood so fast his chair fell back, drawing startled glances from nearby tables. Lena moved faster. She guided Eli to the floor, her hands already steadying his head. Eli, stay with me. Look at me, okay? You're safe, someone gasped. Another whispered. Hundreds of eyes turned toward them, murmurs rippling like waves. Dominic knelt beside her, his composure gone, fear raw in his eyes. What do you need? Glucose pen, she said quickly. Bag on left side. He moved without hesitation. For once, there was no arrogance, no control, just a father terrified for his son. Lena injected the dose, her voice calm but firm. Come on, Eli, come back to me. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then finally, a gasp. Eli blinked, color returning to his face. Lena let out a shaky breath. The room erupted in low chatter, flashes from phones lighting the walls. Dominic's hand gripped her shoulder. Tight, grounding. You saved him, again, she met his gaze. Always. For a moment, the world around them vanished. Just the three of them, Dominic, Lena, Eli, bound together by something no one else in that glittering room could understand. But not everyone was watching with sympathy. Across the hall, Silas Crow stood by the bar, eyes narrowed, watching the way Dominic's hand lingered on Lena's arm. He smiled slowly, darkly. Well, he murmured to himself, swirling his drink. Looks like the devil's found his weakness. Back in the car, silence filled the space between them. Eli slept, head resting on Lena's shoulder. Dominic sat across, staring out the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. Finally, he said quietly, You shouldn't have had to handle that alone. She shook her head. You were there. That's what mattered. His eyes met hers. You don't understand. He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Never mind. Lena leaned closer. Dominic, his name in her mouth did something to him. He turned away too quickly. You've done enough for one night. But his voice trembled slightly. Just enough for her to hear what he couldn't say. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, Dominic stood in his office staring at a single photograph. His wife, smiling, holding a baby Eli in her arms. Then, slowly, he set it face down. In its place, he saw another image in his mind. Lena, kneeling on the ballroom floor, fearless, unshaken, saving the only thing he'd ever loved. And for the first time in years, he didn't see a ghost. He saw light. A light that terrified him more than darkness ever could. The storm came before dawn, wind screaming through the trees, rain clawing at the glass like it wanted in. Lena barely slept. The events from the gala had been replaying in her mind for days. The whispers, the stares, the way Dominic's hand had lingered on her arm. She wasn't supposed to feel this way. He wasn't supposed to look at her that way. And yet, here they were, trapped in a mansion that suddenly felt too small for the silence between them. By morning, Dominic had changed. He was quieter, colder. He gave orders with mechanical precision, avoided her eyes, buried himself in work. But something was different. Something behind the distance, like a storm barely contained beneath the surface. It all came to a head at noon. She was on her way to check on Eli when she noticed two large men stationed by the hall near her room. Both wore dark suits, earpieces, and the same rigid posture she'd seen from Dominic's security detail at the gala. "What's this?" she asked. One of them responded flatly. "Orders from Mr. Vance, ma'am. You're not to leave the property without escort." Her stomach dropped. "Excuse me?" The guard didn't move. "For your safety, my safety?" she repeated, incredulous. "Am I under house arrest?" Before he could answer, Dominic's voice came from behind her, calm, deep, commanding. Inside, Lena. She turned, fury flashing in her eyes. "You can't be serious." "I am," he said simply. They faced each other in the grand hall. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows. slicing the air between them into sharp lines of light and shadow. What the hell is this, Dominic? Bodyguards outside my room? Are you planning to microchip me next? His jaw clenched. After what happened at the gala, I'm not taking chances. Silas Crow doesn't make idle threats. So your solution is to turn me into a prisoner? I'm keeping you alive. I didn't ask you to. She snapped. He took a step closer, eyes hard. You think Crow doesn't know who you are now? You think he won't use you to get to me? She folded her arms, chin lifting defiantly. You can't control everything. Dominic's voice lowered, dangerous and raw. I control what I care about. And right now, that's you. The words hit like a pulse of heat through her chest. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. His breath was uneven now, his control slipping. You don't understand what kind of man I am, Lena. People who get close to me don't stay safe for long. Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. Then maybe stop pretending you don't want them close. The tension cracked like lightning. He stepped forward until she could feel his breath on her skin. Rain-scented, sharp, unsteady. You think this is simple? He asked, almost a growl. You think I can want you and still be the man I need to be? She stared up at him, her voice soft but sure. Maybe you're scared because for once you can't control it. His hand moved, not rough, not gentle either, to her face. You drive me insane. Good, she whispered. It's mutual. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The ticking clock, the storm outside, even the air between them. Then his mouth was on hers. The kiss wasn't tender. It was a collision, of guilt, of longing, of everything they'd both tried to bury. Her hands fisted in his shirt. His arms snaked around her waist, pulling her closer as if distance itself was a sin. It was desperate, fevered, wrong, and it felt like the only truth left in the world. When he finally broke away, breath ragged, his forehead rested against hers. Rain lashed the windows behind them. This is a mistake, he said hoarsely. Then why does it feel like the only thing that's real? He laughed once, bitter, low, almost broken. Because I've spent half my life surrounded by lies. Lena searched his face, seeing what no one else could. The cracks in his armor, the man buried beneath the empire. Dominic! He kissed her again, slower this time, as if memorizing her. But there was pain in it too, a war between desire and self-loathing. When he finally pulled back, he whispered against her lips. I don't know what to do with this. It makes me weak, she met his eyes, or it makes you human. That silence, heavy, fragile, sacred, stretched between them. Then he turned away, as if the weight of what he'd done was too much to bear. Hours passed. The rain didn't stop. Lena sat by the window, watching lightning split the sky, her heart still echoing with the ghost of his touch. She should have felt guilty. She should have been angry. Instead, she felt something terrifyingly simple, alive. Eli found her later that evening. Dad's been weird, he said, frowning. He keeps pacing. Lena smiled faintly. Yeah, he's figuring things out, like math. She laughed softly. Something harder. That night, Dominic stood in the doorway of her room. No words. Just silence and the sound of rain hitting the glass. He looked exhausted, but not from work. From restraint. I shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Then why are you? He exhaled. Because every time I close my eyes, I see you. Lena's breath caught. Dominic? He shook his head. You don't understand what this means. If I let this happen, I can't protect you. From them. From me. Then stop protecting me, she said, standing. Start trusting me. Something broke in his expression, the last of his defenses shattering. He crossed the room in 3 strides and kissed her again, harder this time, a storm inside a storm. The world outside raged, thunder roaring like a heartbeat. But inside that room, time stopped. Every breath, every touch, every unspoken confession melted into that one moment. The devil finally letting himself fall. When he pulled away, rain dripped down the window like tears. He cupped her face, his voice barely a whisper. You make me forget who I am. She smiled sadly. Maybe that's the point. Later, when the house went silent again, Dominic sat alone in his office, drenched in half-light. He stared at the phone on his desk, the secure line only a few people in the world knew. It buzzed once. A text Silas Crow, lovely nurse. Brave move bringing her to the gala. Tell me, Dominic, how far are you willing to fall for her? Dominic's hand tightened around the phone. Outside, the thunder rolled like laughter. And for the first time, he didn't know whether the storm outside, or the one inside him, would destroy him first. The morning was heavy, gray, and suffocating. Sunlight tried to pierce the clouds, but even it seemed hesitant, as if the world itself sensed the danger lurking in the shadows. Dominic's phone buzzed violently, shattering the fragile silence of the mansion. He snatched it up, eyes scanning the message that made his blood run cold. Give me your girl, or I kill the boy. Eli, his son. The words hit like a hammer, a shockwave through his chest. Dominic's hands tightened around the phone, knuckles white, a low growl escaping his throat. His gaze locked on Lena, sharp, commanding, yet laced with an almost desperate plea. They have Eli, he said flatly, voice taut with tension. Lena's stomach twisted, but her mind snapped into focus. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. Then we go. We bring him back, she said, steady, precise. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. Dominic nodded once, curt, and moved toward the garage. There would be no calls for backup, no waiting for reinforcements. Only the two of them, and the life of a boy dangling by the thinnest thread. The drive was silent, except for the hum of the engine and the occasional distant siren echoing through the empty streets. Rain began to fall, light at first, then harder, striking the windshield in irregular, threatening rhythms. Lena's hand brushed Dominic's briefly as he drove, and he glanced at her, eyes dark pools of worry, and something more vulnerable, something unspoken. She didn't speak. There was no time. By the time they reached the abandoned warehouse, the world had turned into a blur of wet concrete and shadows. The building loomed like a dark, menacing fortress, windows cracked and dark, metal doors rusted and ajar. Lena's pulse hammered in her chest, adrenaline sharp and bitter. She could feel Dominic's tension beside her, the rigid set of his jaw, the subtle trembling of his hands as he adjusted the weapon at his side. They entered cautiously. The warehouse smelled of oil, mold, and decay. Every step echoed like a warning. And then silence. Too complete. Too heavy. Lena felt it in her gut. The kind of silence that always preceded chaos. A sudden metallic clatter rang out. The two froze. Shadows shifted, and then came the first gunshot. A sharp cracking noise that made Lena flinch. Dominic reacted instantly, shoving her behind a large wooden crate as bullets ripped into the air around them. Sparks flew from metal as rounds struck, and somewhere in the darkness a muffled scream echoed, the sound of Eli. Dominic's head whipped toward the sound. "He's here!" he barked, fury and fear colliding in his voice. Lena's stomach lurched. Eli. Her mind conjured his pale, terrified face, his tiny hands trying to protect himself. She swallowed the panic, grounding herself. "We move together," she said, voice low but firm. "Cover me while I find him." Dominic's eyes softened just for a heartbeat before hardening. He nodded and moved, a predator stalking through the shadows, weapon raised, senses razor sharp. Lena followed, keeping low, ears straining. Every creak of the floor, every droplet of rain leaking through the ceiling, sounded like a warning. Then they saw him, Eli, bound and kneeling, face streaked with tears and dirt, gagged with a rag, eyes wide with fear. Lena's heart cracked. "Eli!" she whispered, running forward, ignoring the bullets that whistled past. Dominic was at her side in an instant, firing shots with precision, keeping the assailants at bay, while Lena reached her son. Her hands shook as she worked the ropes, but training and desperation sharpened her movements. "It's okay, Eli, I've got you. You're safe," she murmured, pulling him into her arms. His tiny body trembled against hers, tears soaking her dress, his breath ragged. Dominic's gaze swept the room, calculating, lethal. He had never looked more human, more exposed, because this was his son, his blood, his everything. The assailants regrouped, trying to flank them. But Dominic moved like a force of nature. blocking striking shooting. One of them lunged, and Dominic took a wound in his shoulder, grunting in pain, staggering. Lena froze for a second, panic threatening to overtake her, before adrenaline surged. Dropping to her knees, she pressed against the wound, applying direct pressure, whispering frantic encouragement. "Stay with me, Dominic. You're not dying here, not now. Not like this." The chaos around them blurred. Bullets ricocheted, sparks flew, and the metallic tang of blood filled the air. Lena's hands worked furiously, stabilizing him, stopping the bleeding as Dominic's weapon continued to bark, keeping enemies at a distance. Every second felt like an eternity. Every heartbeat counted. She could feel the life force slipping from him, could hear it in the shallow rasp of his breathing. Then she saw the opportunity. Silas Crowe, smug, cocky, had revealed himself to gloat. He had Eli as bait, thinking Dominic would falter. Dominic's eyes, burning with a feral intensity, locked on him. "You don't get to win," Dominic growled, pain and rage mingling in every word. Lena felt it too, the coiled power, the utter refusal to let anyone take what mattered most. Dominic moved. Fast, precise, unstoppable. The final shot rang out, shattering the heavy tension like glass. Silas collapsed, a smirk fading into horror. The warehouse fell silent, except for the sound of rain drumming on the metal roof. Lena sank to her knees, cradling Dominic as he swayed, the wound still bleeding but controlled. Eli clung to her, shivering, whispering, "Mom, Dad." His voice broke her heart and healed it all at once. Dominic leaned into her, exhausted, bloodied, but alive. Lena's hands shook as she pressed against his shoulder again, murmuring, "You're alive. You're here. That's all that matters." He closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against hers, his strength gone, replaced by raw, vulnerable humanity. Eli, finally freed, nestled between them. The boy's small hands clung to his father, then Lena, a fragile triangle of blood, sweat, and tears. The storm outside raged, wind howling through the broken windows, thunder crashing as if echoing their ordeal. Inside, it was silent, intimate, sacred in its chaos. Hours later, when the sirens arrived in the distance and the adrenaline ebbed, they sat among the debris, soaked, bruised, and shaken. Dominic's gaze lingered on Eli, then shifted to Lena. Words were unnecessary. The understanding was total. They had survived, but not unscathed. They had paid a price, physical, emotional, and perhaps forever. Lena rested her head on Dominic's shoulder, feeling the slow pulse of his blood beneath her fingers, and for the first time they allowed themselves to simply be. Eli drifted to sleep between them, exhausted from fear and trauma, his soft breaths grounding them in the fragile peace that followed chaos. Dominic, still breathing heavily, whispered almost to himself, I can't let anyone hurt you. Ever. Not him. Not anyone." Lena tilted her head, brushing rain-soaked hair from his forehead. "Then stop trying to do it alone. Trust me, Dominic. Trust us." He swallowed, nodded slightly, then exhaled a long, shuddering breath. The warehouse was no longer just a place of terror. It had become the place where they all realized what mattered most. Blood had been shed, tears had been cried, but survival had forged a bond deeper than fear, stronger than any threat outside those walls. Outside, the storm raged on, relentless. Inside, 3 lives clung together, scarred but unbroken, bound by love, fear, and the knowledge that nothing would ever be the same again. And somewhere, in the shadows beyond the warehouse, the faintest trace of a smile crept across Silas Crowe's face, even in defeat. The battle was over, but the war and the consequences of what had been unleashed was far from finished. The mansion was quiet, almost oppressively so. The storm had passed hours ago, leaving a glistening layer of rain on the streets outside. But inside, the silence was thick with all that had happened, the chaos, the fear, the adrenaline, and the fragile relief that Eli was safe. Lena carried him to his room, brushing damp hair from his forehead, humming softly until his small body finally relaxed into sleep. She lingered for a moment, letting the warmth of his breathing settle around her, before stepping into the hall, sensing Dominic behind her. He didn't speak as he followed her upstairs, and the air between them was charged, not with anger or tension this time, but with something heavier, more intimate, something that had nothing to do with power or control. His eyes, normally sharp and cold, were clouded, haunted, and uncertain. Hours passed. Lena sat by the window, watching the moonlight dance on the wet pavement below, thoughts spinning from the events of the night. She could feel Dominic's presence even when he didn't move, and she knew he was close, waiting for the courage to breach the space between them. Finally, he appeared at her bedroom door. He was not the untouchable tycoon she had feared or admired. He was just a man, and the vulnerability in his posture made her chest tighten. Rain still clung to his hair, droplets glistening like tiny stars along his dark sleeves. A fresh cut along his shoulder reminded her of how close they had come to losing him. He started, voice low, unsteady. I never believed in love. Not really. I thought it was weakness, a luxury I couldn't afford. But, his voice faltered. His eyes searched hers, filled with a raw, unfiltered honesty she had never seen before. You make me want to be weak. To let someone see me like this. And it terrifies me. Lena's breath caught. She had seen Dominic command boardrooms, bend men and women to his will, take what he wanted without hesitation. But never this. Never the man behind the empire, naked in his fear and longing. Her hand moved almost on its own, brushing against his shoulder, feeling the warmth, the thrum of life beneath his skin. Then let me be weak with you, she whispered, voice soft but unwavering. Her fingers traced the line of pain along his skin, a gentle defiance, a promise. Dominic exhaled sharply, closing his eyes. I don't know how to do this, how to be this human. I've spent my life building walls, controlling everything, expecting everyone to obey. But with you, his words faltered, heavy with something he couldn't yet name. I just want to fall apart, if only for a moment. Lena moved closer, pressing her palm against the side of his face. Then fall apart, she said. And I'll catch you, always. He swallowed hard, eyes glimmering with unshed tears. Do you know what that does to me? His voice was barely more than a whisper, trembling, raw. It makes me want things I thought I'd buried. Want you? She smiled faintly, brushing her lips against his jaw in a fleeting, tender gesture. Then want me. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Hours slipped by, and the mansion felt like the only place in the world. Rain pattered softly against the windows, and the quiet intimacy between them became a language of its own. Lena rested her head against his chest, listening to the uneven but steady beat of his heart. Dominic's arm wrapped around her, pulling her closer, as if proximity could somehow anchor him against the storm inside. You're warm, he murmured, his lips brushing her hair, and I don't know how to stop wanting this. You don't have to stop, Lena replied, voice soft but firm. We can want it together. Let's be human. Let's be weak together, if that's what it takes. Dominic's lips met hers in a gentle, searching kiss. It started slow, careful, almost afraid of breaking something delicate, then deepened with all the pent-up longing, fear, and relief that had built between them. Lena's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, letting him feel her as she let him feel her. I've spent my life surrounded by power and fear, he whispered against her lips. And now I just want you. I can't protect you from myself, but I want to. Lena traced the line of his jaw with a finger, pressing her forehead to his. You don't have to protect me from yourself. You just have to trust me. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. He breathed her name, low and broken. Lena, his voice cracked. I never knew it could feel like this, like the world is heavy and light and terrifying all at once. You're not alone, she said. Not tonight, not ever. We're together, and that has to be enough. They kissed again, slower this time, savoring the warmth, the closeness, the small, miraculous sense of peace they had carved out amidst chaos. Hours passed, night giving way to dawn. Finally, they sat together on the terrace, wrapped in each other's arms, gazing at the Hudson River glimmering in the early light. I am the devil, Lena, Dominic said softly, voice trembling with something she had never heard before. Vulnerability. I've lived in darkness, ruled through fear, taken what I wanted, and I've destroyed people. But if you choose to stay, I swear I will protect you. Always. Even if the world collapses, even if I fail, even if I'm all alone, I will protect you. Lena rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady pulse beneath her hand. Then I will stay, she said, and I will be your weakness and your strength. We'll be human together, and maybe that's stronger than anything else. Dominic tightened his hold around her, pressing his forehead to hers. You make me forget who I am, he whispered, and I don't know how to go back to being the man I was before you. Maybe you don't need to, Lena replied. Maybe that man is gone, and that's fine. We have each other. That's enough. The sun rose higher, golden light spilling across the river. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. The devil wasn't alone. Lena wasn't afraid, and Eli, sleeping safely inside, was proof that even in darkness, light could endure. Dominic kissed her again, gentle this time, lingering. I never believed I could feel love like this, but you, his voice broke, raw with emotion. You changed everything. Lena pressed her lips to his, whispering, Then let's face the world together. Blood, tears, storms, whatever comes. Together. And for the first time, the devil kept a promise. Not to power, not to fear, not to revenge, but to love. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more. Your support means the world to me. Let me know in the comments what you think about Dominic and Lena's story. Your thoughts and feelings always make my day. Stay tuned for the next chapter, and thank you again for being part of this journey.